And we are up.
All right, welcome back to Binary Information Nexus, your podcast of sin. I feel like I get deeper each time I do it.
I think you're getting better at it. I think your next calling should be a DJ.
Sunday. Podcast of sin.
By episode 100, I don't like. What are you going to be using, a voice changer or something?
In a world where Binary is your only information nexus.
Don't do that again. That makes me nervous. Well, gentlemen, welcome back. Another week. Cheers to everyone.
Cheers.
And Mario with his apple juice. Today, the beer folks are drinking Paul Anner,
Polaner.
Muchen, Salvatore, Double Bock.
Yeah, you're just trying to mess it up now.
No, I don't know how to.
Making a bunch of Germans upset. You know how that goes.
I don't know how to. Oh, it's Munich. My bad.
Yes.
Well, they spell it Munchen.
Yes.
That's Munchen,
Yes.
not Munich.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because Munich is the Anglicization of the word.
Holy crap. That's hoppy.
It's a double bock.
Mine's pretty strong too.
Yeah. You know what's sad about that? I even went out of my way to buy you like the hard cider, and you're drinking apple juice.
No,
Sometimes it's to prove a point.
he's chasing his apple cider with apple juice.
I see.
Also, this one is 7.9% alcohol by volume.
Hey, so we're getting better.
Yeah.
I see that you have you've
Which
double
means
loaded.
I need two. That's right.
You double loaded. You got one ready to go when you finish that
Well,
one.
you started drinking that one before the podcast even started.
Oh, I know.
I know. Gotta get ready.
The pregame.
Yeah, you and your questions. I gotta get prepared for them.
Well, I think as we move forward with this, I think we're starting to get like a sense of how these podcasts are gonna roll. So I always like to start with what's in the news, for sure. And I was combing through our typical news sites, and from the Hacker News, I found an article from last week. This is actually from last week, titled "From Infection to Access: A 24-Hour Timeline of a Modern Stealer Campaign." So, I'll link it in the YouTube's description to this article. But there's nothing in here that we don't know. That there is it's not an insight, but there is something funny that I want to talk to you guys about. But basically, Redline accounts for 44% of all stealers. Raccoon 25%. Luma C2 18% is what this study found. And of course, they all extract browser cookies, tokens, all that stuff,
Yep.
and the credentials as well. But I think the thing that this article wanted to point out more than anything else was there was two things: the scale of these stealers, like how prevalent they are, and then they've actually got a section in here called session tokens, the new currency, that really relates to initial access brokers. Is what I'm taking from this. But one thing that kind of surprised me was that a lot of these stealers are exfiltrating data through Telegram channels, which I didn't know.
Yeah. We've actually seen that. We saw that on what was that? It was about 4 weeks ago. We saw it on a threat down alert, I think. That we chased it down, and as we were going through some of those telemetry of what was happening on that endpoint, we found that it had installed Telegram in order to exfil. So yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that, and even if you look at any of the dark web scanning products, there's a reason that they monitor all the Telegram bots, because that's where they put a lot of that stuff, is all via Telegram.
Yeah, I think we deal with our fair share of not token stealers, but credential stealers. Redline being
Yep.
the one that's most prevalent.
You heard
With us.
the Department of State put out a $10 million bounty
Oh, yeah.
on the head of or the maker of Redline.
Mm.
I forget the guy's name, but they have it in the
Let me guess, he's Russian.
yes he is. you hit the nail on the head there.
Mm.
For an unrelated reason.
Right.
It's a good guess, right? So later in this article, it talks about, like, we understand credential theft and token theft. We deal with that all the time. But it talks about in here how it bypasses MFA. Of course, we understand how that works as well. And then it talks about how to defend your organization. And it's here that I thought was very interesting. There is no way to defend, because what it talks about is you want to revoke all sessions, sign the account out of all sessions, change the user's passwords, monitor network traffic for Telegram domains, and use the browser fingerprinting and anomaly detection to flag suspicious session use from unknown devices or locations. So that's something that we do as a SOC. I know that we monitor that for that stuff with our clients that have that service through us. But what there's no preventive in here.
Right.
This is all detective type controls.
I wouldn't even say that it's really, well, there's the monitoring for the Telegram channels, but those are remediations. Those
Right.
aren't
And
either
some of those
detective or
remediations
preventive.
won't actually fully kick them out. Like, I mean, there's still a possibility if they've gotten into a cloud service and they've put a public share link in there. It doesn't matter that you just changed the credentials; they still have access to all your information. So there's plenty of things attackers can do to make it to where even those remediations, now that they've gotten access to things, doesn't actually do anything.
Well, it doesn't even attack the core of the issue, the stealer itself, which we found when in working with a lot of education institutions. The stealers aren't on the actual organizational device; they're on the personal device of the user at their house.
And the user's using organization accounts for doing things from their personal device.
Especially Gmail or Office 365. A lot of times they'll sign that in to their personal accounts at home or their personal computers at home, which, if they're sitting there with Redline Stealer sitting on it or Luma, that gets stolen. We've actually seen this in a lot of the CISA notifications that get sent to us, that through the region centers or wherever, that the data that they're reporting on is personal computer data that has a stealer on it that got had a password stolen that affected another organization. So,
and in some of the attack chain research we've done recently for like a red team and stuff like that, I've noticed there's more and more malware groups or ransomware groups that are packaging in credential stealers with their normal payloads. And what that means is, and I've started giving this directive more and more as we've done certain investigations, whenever we see a compromised account, we almost have to assume that there was a credential stealer that may not have gotten caught through normal telemetry.
Right.
And so it's not a reset that user's password. It is a who all has used that device and reset all of their account passwords.
Yeah.
Because at that point, if the tech director, or not tech director, but anyone from tech and with like domain admin creds had logged into that computer to do troubleshooting, there's a potential those credentials are cached on that computer, and now the credential stealer has exfiltrated that. So it adds a further level of complexity to remediation for almost any event now, because we have to assume that credential stealer was involved.
So just because, again, largely the stuff that at least as far as you've read so far, the article just puts forth remediations and some detective controls. What would we say is some like preventative controls that you can actually do for something like that? Because they do exist.
I'll be honest, one of the big ones is locking down execution policies. Here we have like Threat Locker that really locks down what applications are allowed to do what and what applications are even allowed. and I think most of the red line stealers and credential stealers out there that are leveraging some of the things that they do are relying to some degree on, I won't say misconfigured, but not best practice configured user permissions.
So the credential stealers that we've seen, and y'all can tell me if I'm wrong because y'all live in this world a lot more than I do these days. They're very quiet. They're not. I mean, they're flying under the radar. I mean, you have to have world-class EDR to even start to look for these things, right? And then if they recompile it and it gets a different hash, most EDRs won't pick up on that unless it does a behavior thing that triggers the EDR on that. So I don't know that intra and intra ID may be something that you can deploy to make sure that the device is authorized, right?
Right.
Instead of allowing somebody to sign in from their home machine with their work or organizational credentials, enroll that device in intra.
I think that, again, things like conditional access policies to prevent people from logging in, unless you meet certain circumstances, like being on the internal network or being a part of like a zero trust network. Here we use Tailscale, so you actually have to be a part of the Tailscale infrastructure to actually be able to authenticate to anything.
Which is tied to the device, which basically makes it a different form of MFA.
And another thing, which I understand this is very kind of difficult to implement effectively, but and it's very old school, but the practice of least privilege.
Yeah.
If you have an account that doesn't have access to anything, they stole the credentials. It's not worth anything.
Right.
Just reset the thing. The issue is whenever you get credentials that are compromised that are administrators, domain admins, or have some sort of cloud-based SaaS service that they're a high-level user in but don't really need it. And that's where that really bites you in the butt.
I should go back and remediate one thing I said, which is that for domain admins that have logged in to a device, that's going to be NTLM hashes. As long as you're using highly unique and complex passwords, that should be okay. I mean, it's a much higher barrier of entry, I should say.
I think the difficult thing that a lot of people don't want to hear is there's not a tool that prevents it.
Yeah.
The example I read once is, like a bulletproof vest isn't there to stop you from getting shot.
Right.
It's stopping you from taking fatal or harmful damage.
Limiting impact.
Correct, which that's basically what best practices does. A lot of people want that, how does this stop? And unfortunately, there's just things that you do around the issue that prevent that critical damage.
You're lowering the probability and limiting the impact, right? That's what it comes down to. And I think for us as cybersecurity professionals, I think one of the things that because what do we talk about all the time? Defense in depth, MFA being one of those defenses. Well, in this case, they've worked their way around MFA in the cloud.
Right.
And we see it all the time with proxy sites and Evil and Nginx, you set up. I mean, that unfortunately, that's the world that we're in. And this article, I don't think I can fault this article at all by saying, let's move from preventive and just talk about the detective, because that's what we do. Right? We're like, oh, okay, we detected it. Here's what you need to do.
Well, and that's been for a while now, that's been kind of our focus whenever it comes to phishing in general, is, we went away from trying to educate the end user or we still do some email filtering and we have iron scales and stuff like that, but overall, our big focus is limiting impact if the phishing does occur.
Right.
Because overall, it doesn't matter what kind of system you're using or what kind of controls you have in place. With phishing especially, it's so broad and so adaptive that it's nearly impossible to fully stop.
Well, and this just highlights again what we know anecdotally for sure. Verizon's 2025 data breach report stated 88% of all breaches involved stolen credentials. We see that all the time with the ransomware cases that we work. So those stolen credentials lead to not only like they've got access to your cloud and they're going to be spamming everybody in your contacts, but it also could lead to worse if you've got an SSL VPN with those same credentials that are tied to it. I mean, there's all kinds of bad things that can happen. It just, I think the article, what was fascinating to me is they didn't even try and pretend, hey, to prevent this, this is what you do. It just says, hey, if you notice this, this is what you do, right? And so I thought that it was an interesting article. Other than that, it's been pretty slow in the news this week.
Call back to the webinar. See, I was way closer in ratio than I thought on the webinar, which I'm plugging the webinar. If you haven't seen that, if it's up,
it's on this channel.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube channel.
Go back and listen to that. It will help you. But we talked about the different attack chains that the case studies. We said it in the webinar. 9 out of 10 times, right? It's always going to begin with compromised credentials versus any of the other attacks. And that Verizon newsletter pretty closely shares those details.
Yes.
And I mean, and that's what we've seen in our incidents we've worked is honestly the access brokers are going hard right now. I mean,
he's taking a drink of his alcohol.
Oh, well,
he's succumbed to the peer pressure.
Hey, I'm on number 2. Cheers.
Yeah.
Are you already finished with your first?
Hell yeah.
Again, he started like probably 5 minutes.
He probably started at 8:30 this morning.
Yeah.
The podcast makes us nervous.
How do you think I make such good malware?
I haven't seen it yet.
So I will bring up one thing though, and you may have it next, but you're talking about not much in the news. But what about the Screen Connect stuff?
I know. I was about to bring that up too.
Oh, I've completely forgot
Yeah.
about that.
They still say that supposedly it was a very limited number of customers that actually had anything leaked. But
Isn't
we've
that what
we've dealt
everyone
with that
says?
so many times. I mean,
we have to preface everything from here on as, in our opinion,
yeah, right.
based on nothing, right? But yeah, so the Screen Connect thing, for those that don't know, you want to enlighten everyone?
Yeah. So Screen Connect, which is a really popular remote assistance tool, RMM tool, which we know from our customers that is widely used. They had kind of a major incident. I think last week, I believe, was when that was kind of
and
first
I think it was
notified.
leveraging a vulnerability that they just recently disclosed as well. It's an ASP.NET vulnerability that's in their web pages.
But I think they said that a limited number of customers were affected, but I think they were able to actually access that service whenever it did occur. But again, kind of in our opinion, generally when organizations will say a limited number of users were affected, it's mostly from initial investigations, and then it comes out that.
Now, last I saw, someone had actually put a number to that, and don't quote me 100% on this. I'll go back and see if I can find the article and give you the link. But it was 300 of their customers. The other thing that I think is interesting about this is even from the get-go with their press release, they were talking about it being a nation-state actor and being targeted. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean you weren't part of the attack.
So,
but,
okay, so there is. I get the idea about organizations. If you get breached, you want to make it look as sophisticated as possible.
I mean, sure.
I.e., Power Schools.
Yeah.
It was
But
it was a Russian state actor. No, it wasn't. There was a dude in Baltimore, wherever he was, that signed in to your freaking help desk. Right? That's how that attack went
No,
down.
this one was an exploit, which that's another thing is we've seen a lot less exploits leading to compromise like this recently. So it's interesting that this one came from a new exploit. Basically, I mean, by all intents and purposes, a 0 day at the time.
It may absolutely be a nation-state actor. Absolutely may be a nation-state actor. I'm just saying that big organizations have an incentive to make it look as make it sound like it was this PhD level exploit that was crafted just for us to exploit one thing that not even the United States government could see.
Well,
right?
that's the PR jargon.
Yes.
You'd rather hear that, so you can feel safe that, high-level entity got pwned by a high-level entity versus, low blow Joe in Baltimore.
Right. We have no evidence to suggest otherwise.
Right.
We all know we have sat in this business for years watching these large organizations get popped, and the organization coming out saying nothing to see here, it wasn't that big a deal, and then 3 months later it turns into the largest breach ever known. Right. I mean, Kaseya.
Oracle.
Yeah. Well, you
I mean,
have to admit it
wasn't-
first.
It wasn't a breach, of course.
Well, yeah.
Well, and so going back to the point on the whole, you've got black belt level hackers targeting all of these different organizations. A couple of years ago, whenever you remember when all the high profile Twitter accounts got popped, and turns out it was just a bunch of teenagers in
Yeah.
Britain
Yeah.
that were
Yeah.
buying credentials from people.
Yeah.
And
Was it Lapsus?
yeah, Lazarus.
Or like
Lazarus, yeah.
or like the MGM hack, right?
Yeah.
That was just teenagers doing some social engineering.
Yeah. Speaking of teenagers, this gets us into our topic for today, which I know y'all are going to be very interested in.
We're just now getting into the topic.
We're just now getting into the topic. I know we're running a little behind the schedule here, but
I'm gonna need a third.
oh Lord,
You probably finished Mario. He's not going to drink it.
yeah.
It's fermenting. Getting better.
So I've been thinking about this for a while as a topic because we do get a lot of requests, not requests for the podcast. We get asked quite often, "Hey man, how do I get a job over here? How do I get a job in cyber?" Right. So I thought we could really talk about what it takes to get a job in cyber. I want to dispel some myths first of all. Well, not first of all. We'll dispel some myths as we go through the thing. But I've got like 8 or 9 points that I think are relevant in here on if you want to work in cyber, what does it take, right? And the first one I wrote down is, I think you have to be slightly insane.
Or you got to have a vice. That's another good
Yeah.
interchange
Yeah.
there.
It's so. I think this industry is similar, not like synonymous, but similar to some other industries that require a certain amount of dedication in order to be able to truly get there. I mean, almost any kind of like first responder situation, healthcare. There's a certain amount of dedication it takes to at least the craft or the understanding and even the schooling. There's an idea that you never get to stop learning, like it never stops evolving or changing. And there's the idea that the hours are never going to be regular because the thing you're dealing with is consistent and constant. I think there is a certain level of insanity that is required for that because you have to at least give up a significant portion of your life and other potential enterprises, hobbies, lifestyles.
Rip the band. The band is out now.
Yeah,
We were so close. So close. But I can agree, and maybe we all can agree that I think the insanity is relative. It's relative, and what I mean by that is some people want an 8 to 5. And if you work after those hours, you're insane.
Yeah.
And other people are like, I would never, I would never go out of town for my job. I would never get sent off site. You'd be insane. So I do think it's relative to us. It's another day in the office to be woken up at 3 a.m. to fix some incident, right?
Right.
And for some people in this room, right, it may not be insane to get sent to a completely different state to go help people, right?
So I think there's actually, and this just popped in my head, another side to the insanity that I do think is at least common amongst the people here and amongst the people I've met since
Yeah.
joining this career field
This cult.
of how do I put this? Not a desire, certainly not a desire, but a maybe a quiet Schadenfreude of watching the world.
Man, what the hell does that mean?
I thought he was trying to pronounce the beer again.
Schadenfreude. It's the happiness at the misfortune.
Man,
of
don't
others.
use that word around me again. I don't know what it means.
It's the happiness at the misfortune of others. It's German, like our beer. And so it's
Not sponsored. If you'd love to sponsor us, please reach out to Signary.
Screen Connector, you listening? We could use a sponsor.
right. But yeah, no, I do think there is a certain type of person that doesn't seek out the disasters in the world, but doesn't necessarily mind knowing about them. In
So-
fact, finds a quiet satisfaction in knowing the insider knowledge of how bad the world could be. And I think there's a level to that with the back end knowledge of how the internet works, of how bad all these things truly function and work together, and then watching incidents, also
So-
remediating them, right? But there's a certain level there of
So here's the thing. Whenever we interview for interns, we take our internship folks in, right? All they know is what they've seen on TV, the movies, and that's what they think it is, right? They think it's a NORAD full of
Right.
workstations and big screens and
Hollywood up on the screen.
Hollywood up on a screen. So that's what they think it is, and they come in and it's like, man, this is boring as hell. I don't want to do this, right? And that usually kind of washes them out. And I slightly insane was provocative. I wanted to get the conversation going, but there's something not normal. I say normal.
That's also provocative.
Yes. Most cybersecurity folks, and we talked about this a little bit last week with the acronyms. Most cybersecurity folks that we run into, we can have a decent conversation with. They're like-minded folks. We can talk about them. We can do that thing, man. You're not gonna believe this shit, and we can trade those war stories. But we're all kind of geared toward the same way, right? And the reason why I bring this up is because in this room, in this podcast, you're talking about 4 completely different people from 4 completely different backgrounds that came into this industry. Myself, my path to this was not traditional at all. I mean, I'm older than all of you guys. So cybersecurity wasn't a thing until like the mid 2000s. Back when I was coming up, it was called information security. And how I got into this was late 90s, early 2000s was as an IT auditor, right? Verifying transactions going through a point of sale system. On that, which led me into some other roles in my career. You were an actor.
Yeah. Well, I tried to be an actor. I don't say I was an actor. I did not get paid very much for any of the acting I did, and the very little I did get paid for is of no notoriety to anyone. No one should ever go look up Saved by the Savior.
We've all been young and needed money. We understand.
Some more than others.
But yeah, no, there's
So
yeah,
Google dorking later to find.
Yeah.
I think it would be more appropriate to say that I came from the restaurant industry and
Okay.
serving tables, because I did that for 12 years, and yeah, it was definitely an odd switch to go from that kind of lifestyle and just general mentality
Well,
of how to do business, and then switching over to cybersecurity, which is very different.
I mean, in mid, and don't take this the wrong way, but kind of mid career stream.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't start in cyber like most people would start in cyber by going to school for it. You stopped. I
To
did
be
this
honest,
thing.
I feel like most people don't really go to, outside of in the last probably 10 years, most people that are like in cyber, or what, like the old guard of many
Yeah.
of those people, they didn't go to school for cyber.
They went
That-
to school for something else.
Yeah, it's normally an IT field that you transition into. I think the IT, like security or cybersecurity as a field of study specifically, that's relatively new.
And I think it may be at its core a little bit flawed because of that. And I'm sure we're going to get into this here in a
Yeah.
little bit. But I think maybe that the absence of those fundamentals of some of the other areas of study detracts from the quality that you necessarily can
So
get to.
we're absolutely gonna get into that,
Yeah, I
but I
figured.
do want to talk about the education process, because you two guys came out of like high school and went into technology, studying technology as a formal discipline, then got into cyber and eventually wound up here. I've never had any formal training in cybersecurity or technology. All my stuff's been like on the job throughout the years, learning all this stuff. You stopped mid career stream to go to school and get that. So, and both of you guys, y'all went to different institutions to do that. So I know when I met you, you're just a wee baby.
He's talking to Brazos, by the way. Richard forgets that whenever he points to people and says "you" in the room,
There's
the
no camera,
audience
yeah.
has no clue who he's talking to.
But we knew, don't worry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to understand y'all's perspective on your degrees, and if they informed anything when you got a role as a cybersecurity analyst.
So it's interesting because I started that, and I'll start kind of in high school, because I went to a really extremely rural school. There was
Anyone else want more beer? I'm gonna go grab more beer.
where are you going, the Cefco?
No, my
We don't have that
fridge-
long.
My fridge is full of beer.
Oh wait, no, there's Trojans down on the first floor, or
That's
Crickets.
true.
You can make it back in time.
Yeah. But we have Asahi and we have Paulaner.
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, I like my apple juice is good.
Okay.
But I went to an extremely rural high school, and that high school did not have a single technology program. There was nothing there. And so when I transitioned to an institution of higher education, I kind of knew I wanted to do stuff in IT, but it was really just I closed my eyes and threw something on the dartboard, and it landed on cybersecurity. Really just thought it sounded cool. Went and did it. And I would say what was interesting about that cyber program is it was really just a networking program that
Yeah.
they threw like a Kali Linux.
Packet tracer.
Yeah, like here's packet tracer and a firewall course into, and even then you could lump firewalls into traditional networking really, and I think this is something again we'll probably get into, but I think that did help me a little bit more when transitioning into cyber fully, having that more dedicated networking background
Agree.
rather than a cyber specific degree. Even though my degree was in fact cybersecurity, I just think because again, it being fairly early on in cyber being kind of a dedicated program at that school, I think it had been there for maybe 3
I'm so
4
glad we
years.
don't have the cameras turned.
No. Yeah, keep going.
But
People are like, what the hell are they doing?
We're like cavemen
if
rediscovering
the other
tools.
Mario was in here, he'd just like open it up with his like hand or something, man.
So
It's
we're
crazy.
having problems because yet again we did not grab a bottle opener for our beer, and we are trying to currently figure out how to force it open. That does actually look like it may work better.
But yeah, so I think that core of networking was a lot more beneficial than the cyber program, but we're talking several years ago at this point, so I know that the programs have evolved over time. But
Well, so Mario, what was your how was your path out of high school into cyber?
So I'm currently being a caveman with this, but I'm getting some work on it.
You would never make a mechanical engineer.
So, funny enough, in almost drastic change to Braz's story. So, granted, I am first generation. So before me there was nothing, and after me there was me.
There you go.
So, granted that I grew up in a somewhat small town, or at least at the time, because it's growing quite a bit. I actually went to a high school that had a multitude of programs involving STEM.
Yeah.
And thankfully, in my high school education, I had the opportunity to touch pretty much most of the major fields that a high schooler could touch. So I had a few programming classes. I had various engineering classes stemming from mechanical, thermo, and aero engineering. So I had a lot of different classes on those. And there was actually, I don't exactly remember the title of the course, but there was a general information system, computer information systems class that I picked. So I had quite a broad spectrum of what you could call like maybe samples of the different fields out there. So when I graduated, it was in all honesty, I was thinking of being an engineer.
Yeah.
I was. Partly due to most of my colleagues wanting to do that exact same thing. When you're shoved in the same classes that only specific people pick, right? The same people I see in my programming classes, they're going to be in my thermo engineering classes.
Right.
So we were all very like-minded individuals, and so I might have gone with the herd originally with my first career path, and as I was browsing,
We're happy
higher
you
ed.
changed.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that knowing all you guys from like interns to full on professionals and high performing professionals on top of that, seeing y'all back then and seeing you now is completely night and day. Mm-hmm. And so even in your education, it's like you graduate and you don't know shit. You still don't know shit. You have a foundation of like maybe how things work, but hold on, Braz, tell me. I mean, most of your knowledge comes from on the job.
Yeah, I mean, while going into the school helped, it doesn't it gives you concepts, mm-hmm. but it doesn't actually really reinforce those concepts, and they're largely based in like a clean room. This is very specific to these things, and you get into the actual real world examples of a lot of stuff that they teach you, and you realize that what they teach you is just not
cybersecurity as a discipline has only been around since like 2012 maybe. Mm-hmm. As far as folks, institutions of higher education offering degrees in it or certificates in it or whatever, that's a relatively new thing.
Well, and I have a unique perspective on the juxtaposition between the education and the theoretical and the applied, because my internship started during my first semester, right after my first semester at my community college, and so I was in the classroom with other people that I had been in the same class with them in the first semester, and we were kind of all trying to get this concept together, and it was a struggle for all of us.
Right.
And there was this separation between the information you're learning and being able to say it and put it on like a piece of paper for like a test or an exam, and then being able to do it. And we all kind of had the same separation of, I don't really know how to do this. I understand what the book is saying, and I understand kind of these broad concepts, but I don't really know how to do any of it. And then I started the internship, and by my third semester, whenever I was now employed within the job and doing these things daily, it was very hard for me then to explain to my fellow students at the time what I would have people come up to me and be like, "Hey, why are you getting this?" And I'm like, "It's because I'm doing it. Here's how you can maybe do some of it on your own, But it's really hard whenever you're not actually exposed to real world incidents. And I couldn't. That's not something I could provide to them. I couldn't give them any company, information.
Right.
And so it was, I saw a little bit of a divide between me and them start to open up, because they were like, "Hey, you're able to get this information that I can't get," and I find that exceedingly frustrating, because I knew that they wanted to make that extra step.
How do students enrolled in cybersecurity programs who don't have the opportunity to do an internship at a cybersecurity firm, like do the thing they're being trained to do? Nurses do that, doctors do that, lawyers do that, right?
For free, usually.
Yeah, for free usually, or they pay, right? So how do cybersecurity students who have the drive to do that, how can they get that experience without being in a job where you've got a supervisor telling you, "Hey, this is how you do that. You will do this by the end of the day."
So, and I will address that here in just a second. But one of the things that I wanted to touch on specifically, and this is when you were referring to your community college and the way they did things, I have a really big issue with this push for colleges to move to online courses.
Yes.
And this is because, and it's anecdotal, but when I did my program, one of the things, even though most of this was concept and a lot of theoretical work, the one thing I will say about my college that they did is it was hands-on learning. We had racks with switches and routers and firewalls. We had the tools that they would actually allow you to physically touch, look at the logs to do the work. And as things move to kind of this online platform, that goes away. And you were talking about the concept. I think people have like humans in general, have a difficult time fully conceptualizing concepts without being able to physically touch something. And so whenever you take a concept and you say, "Hey, here's an actual thing you can interact with," it really seats that concept home. And I think as more and more schools switch to that online platform, that goes away. And there's a whole other thing we could talk about, like cohorts and actually being able to interact with people, but I wanted to address that.
I fully agree.
And I think Mario had a point.
Because what I find funny is we seem to always have the inverse of like experience, because I can 100% tell you that I am not special. When my schooling happened, it was during COVID. Everything had to be online. And that was probably the most difficult time, because it is, I'm not only just a visual learner, but there is such a difference between seeing something in front of you and interacting with it than clicking something.
Oh yeah.
I can't tell you how that most definitely impacted me adversely.
I want to and I get what you're saying, both of y'all. On the hands-on, but how would students get hands-on, right, if they don't have a internship?
You're about to say the thing, I think, that I was about to pull
What was I going to say?
Home lab.
Oh,
I mean, because
that's not what I have written down here.
Okay, well, so and I think it's one of those things that it is the number one piece of advice we give to any potential intern or someone who's looking at the industry as a whole and wanting to join it, is we ask them, the very first thing we ask them is, "Was your home lab?" And more
agreed.
often than not, we get, "What's a home lab?"
Or "I don't have one."
Or "I don't have one." Or I'm thinking about it, and this is what I'm thinking about doing. They're talking about buying like 500 things, and it is much simpler than a lot of them think.
It's VirtualBox on a laptop.
So the home lab thing, is really good. I mean, that is again, you are right, number one interview question. What does that look like? What have you been doing? What have you been playing with, testing out? The first thing I want to address there, kind of going back to the whole college thing, I think that should be a function of college. I literally think that you are paying
Help them
them
get it set up
to
Help
do
them
that.
start doing these things.
It would be like, yes, it's great to see kids or people go, and I keep saying kids as if they're not adults, but
We're all old now. Get off my lawn.
it's like, if you're gonna have a home lab, like, that stuff's expensive. Like,
Yeah.
and I get that you don't have to buy all the latest and greatest hardware, but if you were gonna go and buy a full Ubiquity stack of stuff, you're talking about $2,000
Can
versus stuff.
can I throw in my Gen X thing here?
Please.
Okay.
Don't buy that $5,000 gaming rig.
Oh, come on.
Even still,
Rant over.
But it glows.
yeah. The second thing that I want to address, which is the same thing, because I think a lot of people will get trapped in this whenever you're looking at, especially if you're going into cyber, don't get me wrong, I think these are really good programs to go and do. You'll learn a lot doing them, but there's a problem with them. CTFs, things like try hack me, hack the box, all this stuff. People will go do those, and they're great. You're learning concepts. You're learning how to do red teaming and pen testing and all these things. But let me tell you, that is not what your entry-level cybersecurity job is going to look like.
Exactly.
You are going to be a blue team tier 1 SOC analyst. You most likely won't be developing Python malware or going in and trying to exploit Windows machines. It's good to understand that. Again, don't get me wrong, but you need to understand what a SIEM is. You need to understand what an EDR is. You need to know what EVTX logs on a Windows machine
One of the things that I tell the interns that come through here through our interview process is set up your home lab, right? Get you a VM, throw an Ubuntu server on it, and then attack it with Kali, and then look at the logs on the Ubuntu server. That's what you're doing as an analyst.
Yes.
By and large, you're looking at logs and traffic.
And that I think is probably the biggest divide between the real world and the theoretical, is a lot of times whenever they're trying to teach the theoretical, and I get why they do this. They teach the red team aspect of it first, because if you can understand a little bit of that, you may understand what you're looking at in the logs, right? You have to have that underlying understanding of, like, what does this particular web exploit look like, right? But at the same point in time, they think of it like that's going to be their life, and it's like, no, you're not going to be developing that. You're going to be looking for it.
I'll actually, and I don't have any proof to say this, but just knowing how colleges work, I actually want to say that most likely the reason they teach all that is it's flashy and it gets people through the door.
So there's a business case to be made about cybersecurity, which leads me into another topic. Is there actually a cybersecurity analyst shortage?
Yes.
Are there millions of jobs out there waiting to be filled for $400,000 a year?
Not for $400,000 a year. So that's the big lie. There is the amount of money you get paid for doing the job. Let me go on this right quick.
All right. There's a thing out there on the interwebs that if you look up cybersecurity jobs, you will find articles about how many hundreds of thousands of cybersecurity positions are open, unable to be filled because of lack of training. Mm-hmm. Right? That's a narrative being pushed by somebody. Well, I promise you.
I think
so. There's an idea. So, and I this is purely headcanon. Obviously there is the core economic principle of supply and demand. You bring in hundreds of thousands of students, you're obviously driving up the supply, and the demand is shrinking, so you can obviously pay them less.
So my question is, how much is CompTIA making off their certifications?
So I definitely think
and that's a whole nother issue.
Right.
Well, but it feeds it feeds into that same.
It does and it doesn't. I think the colleges are struggling for funds, are using the certificate field in order to help supplement their enrollment, and the certificate field is probably more money making than it is actually verifying qualifying skills.
There is
not that it doesn't.
There is not
something.
a cybersecurity company on this planet worth its salt that says you must have a certification to work here.
Yeah.
You must be degreed to work here.
Oh,
And I
100%.
think the question is sometimes
Because if you got the skills, you got the skills. I don't care if you're 16 or 102.
And sorry, go ahead.
So what I was going to say is I think the question as a whole sometimes gets misconstrued, and I think it's just based on how the job market works. That the question is, there isn't a lack of jobs. Everyone that I've ever seen advertises that there are jobs that are not filled, and that in itself is a completely different ballgame. It's not, hometown person wants a job and can't get it. It's where can they find it? And
Yeah.
how to get there.
Well, and I think that's the other thing is there's
Well, the
also
flip side
a
of
shift.
there's the flip side of that coin is where you get you have those job descriptions looking for entry level SOC analyst that needs 5 years of experience and at least a master's degree.
Well, there's that, but that's not industry specific.
Yeah.
That's across the board.
That's HR people doing
a lot
HR
of corporate
things.
Yeah, you're right. That's a lot of that stuff just out there. I do think there is a shift in the industry though that accounts a little bit for what you're talking about, but also doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't jobs there. And that is that there's a vast shift in the industry between everyone needing a cybersecurity personnel or team, especially like large companies, and them offloading that onto a third-party provider. If it's a third-party provider, they don't need to fill as many positions because that third-party provider can. It's kind of the same thing between like cloud resources versus edge resources, right? If I have a dedicated server for a bunch of different things, then I'm not necessarily completely effectively using all of my resources, as opposed to like a cloud model where we can share resources and start moving things around. So I think there has been that move in the industry of these third-party providers offering cybersecurity. That means that there is a little less of an influx of job positions, or some of those job positions are getting moved over from companies.
That is a whole other episode. Third-party IT providers doing cybersecurity that have no business doing cybersecurity.
Well, yes.
That's a whole nother
Yeah.
podcast, right? And we will absolutely.
What is that? The blind leading the blind.
We've seen it. Yeah, we have seen it for sure. By the way, if you're a IT provider and you're trying to get into cybersecurity, do not ship a laptop with Kali on it to your client and say, "Hey, this is a pen test."
Thank you for the imaginary scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to dispel. Remember, I wanted to dispel myths. That was one of the things I wanted to do. One of the myths that is out there is that you need to be degreed and certified to work in cyber. Does it help? Yes. Do those things need to be true? No, they do not need to be true. Because if you show aptitude as an we've got one here.
Yeah.
We've got one here, fresh out of high school, right? We hired him while he was
now
in high
employed.
school,
Yep,
and
yep.
now employed. He not certified, not degreed,
Right.
but showed aptitude. Somebody that we could bring along.
Now we're still going to have him pursue those degrees.
Yes.
I don't want to set an expectation for people because I do think that is not common. That is extremely rare for people to go into the industry. Now, do I have a problem with that? Yes, I think that people should be able to pursue a job without a particular degree if
So
they can
it's
show the aptitude.
so the question, do you at least have a 2-year degree in cybersecurity, is a barrier to entry in cybersecurity. It is a barrier to entry.
Yes, and it
Period.
does,
Point
and
blank.
it does not need to be there. I think
It does not need to be there.
Yeah, that's my what I'm saying is that there's two areas. I don't believe that barrier should be there. If you show that you have the drive and the skill to do the job, what the hell does the piece of paper mean?
Right.
Nothing.
I will
but
say,
I wanted to address the it is true, or at least largely, that for 90% of the companies out there, if you're going to get a job, you do need that degree.
So it gets you past that first hurdle. The degree and the certs get you past the first couple of hurdles to get to the interview
It's,
process.
it's
right.
face value. I think the reason that it's so different here is we are the ones interviewing people.
Yeah, we don't have
People-
an automated
the-
system
and-
that's dropping you because
Yeah.
you don't have a
that's-
master's degree.
And that's it. The industry as a whole is following what many other industries are, which is using AI or automated systems in order to evaluate resumes. And that's where you have the problem of people who don't have degrees but have knowledge set that would be able to do the job are getting denied.
And to be honest, I do kind of get whenever you're a massive Fortune 500 company, you probably have hundreds of thousands of people putting in. I mean, for example, when we opened that
Yeah.
the LinkedIn
Oh,
page,
Lord.
the amount of stuff that we
The
got
bots,
that was
yeah.
just bots.
Yeah.
So I kind of do get it in
Right.
a way. Like if you and we're not massive like Google by any
Yeah.
means. So think Google when they open up a position, how many bots hit their crap all day. So I get it.
Then they need to do a
But-
better job with the bots.
And
They control the
So
internet.
I think the secondary portion to that is actual data. It's again, we are in the industry. We are the people who do the job that people hire us to do. Most boards don't do that.
Yeah.
You're going to get somebody who.
Well, HR is like the very
Yeah,
first person
yeah.
you're going to hit. You're not going to
Exactly.
be interviewing with
with
most
the
of
tech
the time.
director, cyber, department, and unfortunately, at face value, if you were to tell me you know what you know, and there's a 4-year degree on the table with someone else, they're presenting me data.
Yeah.
You can show me home lab all you want,
No,
but
no,
to someone who's
But
so
but let me hold on because I've
I'm
got a
on
point
lap
on this.
3.
Resume building, right? Degrees and certifications help you build your resume, but so do projects. Regardless if those projects are done with a company or a project that you've done on your own.
That's what I was going to say. Is GitHub is on. So we have the unique ability in this particular field and industry of being very similar to architecture, art. You can create a portfolio,
Yeah.
a project list, have it on GitHub, and at some point in time, you may even be able to get good enough to where other people are using those projects.
You can get HR to download the script to exploit the company you're applying for.
Well,
Get you
I
the
don't. I would never encourage black hat activity at all from GitHub, but I mean beyond proof of concept like
Yeah.
that, you have the fact that you develop something that someone else is using. If you can do that and do it in any significant way, you would. I mean, honestly, you may end up getting headhunted like that because that's another real thing in this industry is headhunting. A lot of the times, you get good enough and people come to you.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I agree with that, but I also don't want to give, like we mentioned earlier, a false expectation. I think there is a bias here because of what we have and what we do and what our impact is in our community. But I'm going to be honest with you. Most careers that have that 1% of 4 billion is a very small number. There are not going to be many people who are just good at their job. You need to be amazing. You need to be the top of the top, and those are the people who get headhunted. Because I'm going to be honest with you, we've had some interviewees that have GitHub projects, and that has not swayed me either way.
Right, but the effort is there, right?
I agree. A decorated resume does help. Having something versus not having
Well,
something
so
does help.
it's not necessarily a decorated resume. It is I've taken my own time outside of studies, outside of class, and I was curious enough to do this thing or these other couple of things. And here it is on my resume. Y'all go check it out. If it's a good fit, great. If not, and I agree. Well, stay in school, kids. Get your degree, get your certs, because that'll get you over the first couple of hurdles for sure. But what I'm saying is that that's not what it's all about.
Agree.
That gets you over the hurdles, but staying power, that's a completely different animal, right? And so what I want to change the conversation to now is, what is it that we look for? Like we're a very small cybersecurity company in the grand scheme of things. We have under 50 employees. what
you
is it?
live within 30 miles of our headquarters.
Yeah,
Reliable.
yeah.
Reliable.
Yeah, you have to have transportation to work here, right? Is one of the things. But what is it that we look for in an applicant that, because we get a lot of applicants for our internship program, right? We can only take so many. I'd love to take them all, but we can't. Finances, and our internship is paid, unlike a lot of other internships, right?
Like mine.
Yeah, like yours. You were never paid. Brazos was
I
working
worked
for
here for
free for
like-
like 7 years.
Yeah, I'm still working. I get a
Joe was never
bag
paid
of
in
rice
his
every
internship,
week,
right?
Yep.
So what is it that we look for? I know one of the things that I always look for is curiosity.
Yes.
Like when I interview a potential intern, I want to know how curious they are about things, because that's something you can't teach.
So I'll say I think I've distilled it down to 3 major things that have to be there. Only one of them is addressed by school or certificates. The other 2 are purely personality and what I see during the interview. And that's not always completely fair, but it's the only snapshot I get. Number 1 is curiosity. Like you said, they have to have a drive for learning in general. Number 2 is passion. They have to want cybersecurity over anything else. And then number 3 is capacity for learning. They have to be able to at least grasp the concepts that we're going to be dealing with and be able to function within those, be able to apply them. If I feel like, oftentimes I felt like people are green in the 3rd category in being able to actually grasp the concepts, I may still take them on if the other 2 are really, really good, right? We can at least see during our 3-month internship process where they are and whether they're actually able to retain that information.
And this is where the degrees and the certs come into play.
Right, exactly.
Have they stuck something out? Because one of the keys for me is persistence.
And I think one of the things that I read recently, or I think it may have been in a video, to be honest, sometimes I forget the difference between the 2. But there was a talk about how whenever you're doing interviews or applying for a job or whatever that may be, you can no longer solely rely on saying, I'm smart. You're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people that some of them are largely or probably significantly more intelligent than you are. And so instead, one of the things that sets people apart whenever they come in is those soft skills, the ability to communicate with people. And I think you're going to see this more and more with stuff like AI, where people, and that's a whole nother thing, but anyway. But the whole concept of that is the idea of, yeah, you can be extremely intelligent. You can be just a savant at certain things. But if you go in, you can bomb an interview.
Yeah.
Absolutely bomb an interview.
And I will say, I think we've had that happen a few times to where I think they were fairly intelligent people, but something about them didn't satisfy one of those first 2 credentials for me. And I was like, I don't know.
You got MFA for your employees.
Yeah.
Well, I can also say that one of the things that I look for is culture, right? So here at Cynair, we have a definitive culture, and I don't know, I couldn't distill it, right? And
We've tried a few times.
And
I think
define
it goes back to that thing that you originally said, insanity.
yeah.
We like that culture.
Yeah.
But it is a thing that you have to fit within the organization. As well, so you have to get along with your peers, and I'm not saying there's not going to be conflicts, but what I'm saying by and large, you have to buy into the vision,
Right.
Of the organization. As long as you buy into that vision, you adapt to the culture. You're 10 steps ahead of your peers on that. But I want to get back to the persistence, because we've had interns that have bombed interviews that have come back and didn't necessarily, lights out on the interview, but was good enough that, all right, we'll bring you on as an intern and as a
And
full-time
are now
employee.
employed.
A
Yeah,
full-time employee now, and
exactly.
one of our best employees.
And so what I was going to say, for me particularly, and it is a twofold thing, and I agree 100% with you, Brazos, that the first hurdle, because here we kind of bar that education, certificate, degree hurdle, as we've previously stated with a couple of our analysts here. But the first hurdle is those soft skills. If you don't have those soft skills, it's going to be extremely difficult to see where you fit in that culture first and foremost. To see kind of where you fit in the puzzle, as
Right.
it were. And the internship itself is the aptitude test. Can you learn? Can you pick up? And I think the most important thing that all four of us here know to the nth degree is, will you give up?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you, for that culture, everybody that comes here, right? Everybody that eventually winds up working here full time has to do one thing, and it has always been a thing of fear. Call a client on the phone.
Well, it
Yes.
literally goes to the soft skills thing.
Yeah,
Right.
Like,
but they are deathly afraid of picking up the phone and calling somebody. And we had one yesterday where a new employee, fresh out of the internship program, made his first call to a client. And it was fantastic. It was great. He did very, very well. And he got a standing ovation from the SOC. That may speak to culture or how we hire or whatever, but in that case it is about persistence, right? He weathered and he did not give up, and he came back and he kept coming back until he was ready, and we gave him a chance and he excelled, right?
Right.
And very proud of that.
I will never forget the first day my phone rang.
You went, oh no, audibly. It was
Just sitting there staring at the phone for probably a solid 3 seconds. Pick it up. Hello, this is Brazos from Binary.
And that was the beginning of the end. We can't shut him up from there on out.
Yeah, now I go and talk to like 100 people panel, like completely fine.
It's also different. Back then, you would say, "Hello, I'm Brazos," and they'd be confused. Now they're like, "I'm glad I got you, Brazos."
Yeah.
I'm
So
glad-
one of the things that they're afraid of, and this speaks to the role, right? The people that do wind up here, right? They get an opportunity, they become full-time employees. They don't want to screw it up.
Right.
And so they're deathly afraid of screwing it up. And even though we tell them you're going to screw something up, and that's okay, they are still like, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing.
And we try our hardest in order to bridge that gap between learning and when you are live, quote unquote. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of other companies don't necessarily do. But I found that to be highly beneficial to our employees, of giving them that safe space to make failures.
Yeah.
And it has helped us out immensely on
And
the
for
final
any
product of what-
aspiring cybersecurity folks,
Yes.
you got to know if you do get a job, you're going to screw up, you're going to miss something. It's not the end of the world,
Right.
unless you work for CrowdStrike. That was the end of the world. I'm playing.
In
I'm
our
kidding.
opinion.
I'm kidding.
Well, and you'll, and this goes with not even cyber. It's everything that you'll ever do. You learn more from mistakes and failures than you ever will
Absolutely.
from successes.
Absolutely.
In fact, you won't progress in your career or in life without making those failures. So, when they do, and this speaks to the persistence thing, when they do happen, get back up.
Yeah,
Right.
get up,
It
get
is-
better, and move on.
It is not about how many times you get knocked down,
Yeah.
but how many times do you stand back up.
Take your ass chewing. Understand that it's gonna happen. Take it, move on. Right.
Yep.
So one last thing I want to talk about for this is salary expectations. So I see a lot of entry level jobs for $120,000 a year. Right. Who's going to get those jobs?
People that have 10 years experience.
10 years of experience, or they're MIT level grads, and they've
Right.
written their own software sim program, right?
Right.
Whatever it is. Generally, in my research, what you're looking at, depending on the area of the country
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yes.
that you're in, right? You're generally looking, if you're in Texas and in the South, pretty much the Southeast, and even the Southwest, except for California, you're probably looking at anywhere from 50 to 75. Now, the state government, like the state of Texas, those dudes pay well. You can if you can get on there, it's 90,000 plus at an entry
Well,
level.
how many of those jobs require some form of security clearance?
Well, there's a lot of them that
there's
do.
security clearance. There's a lot more education requirements for those. You have to have at least like a bachelor's degree, if not more.
Yeah.
And then what's more, and this is the big thing, is part of what I really enjoy here is the amount of variety I get to enjoy
Yeah.
in my job.
Yeah.
I get to span different domains that in most positions in the industry I would not be able to do.
So we talked to our good friend, and I can't say his name and I can't say the company, but he's a SOC manager for a cybersecurity company in Dallas, and we've known him for years. And he was telling us about his, their, like, what they do, how they run their SOC, or how he runs the SOC. And I was sitting there listening to him at lunch, and I was like, damn, that seems very, like, boring for the analyst, because they are very much an observe and report. They observe it, they report it, and they're done.
Yeah,
they don't dig in, they don't figure out what was happening.
Hey, this
could
is the
be
alert. This is why. Escalate it. I'm done.
and out, right?
I'll actually kind of counter that, at least, with a different perspective. In some ways, that could be more appealing to people. The idea of like not needing to do anything.
But that's your 8 to 5.
Yeah,
Right.
That's your 8 to 5 personality.
Yeah, and there are those kind of jobs out there in this industry. I will say I think that they are quickly being reduced by AI and by automation. I think the people that are able to critically think and go beyond the confines of a specific alerting protocol or just signatures and understanding what they mean, being able to develop, being able to look towards governance and risk. I think these are things that are going to be judgment calls that AI is never going to be able to do.
I agree.
Or at least no time soon.
I agree.
Those are going to be the kind of jobs that are really going to be wanted.
So you're going to see a lot of cybersecurity companies move. I think CrowdStrike is already moving this way to replacing full-on analysts with AI. Like that's not a good move. That is not a good move. Unless you're replacing the tier 1 analyst that all they do is they look at the alert and decide that needs to be escalated. That can be scripted, sure, whatever, on that. But this whole move to cybersecurity AI, again, a completely different podcast. But as far as salary expectations, obviously it depends on number of years you've been in the industry, right? You guys can go out and make a lot more money somewhere else. But there's also, salary compensation incorporates more than just money, right? It's about, do you have a good work-life balance? Here we do not. We suck at that.
We do.
At least management.
I still say we do better than most.
Yeah.
On that particular front.
Time, and don't get me wrong, money is a huge incentive for a lot of people, but it's not the only incentive, and in some cases it's not even the primary incentive for many people. For example, for me, there's a lot of reasons that I continue to work here, even with the understanding of I could probably go somewhere else and make more money.
Right.
But you look at
Brazman just threatening us on the podcast.
yeah.
A couple beers in, he's
Right.
The idea of just okay, well, I would not be able to stay where I live and be able to work for. This is the only cybersecurity company that's within driving distance of my house. There's the idea of what we do is a noble goal. I mean, the idea of protecting local government, people that don't have the budgets to be able to pay for these large organizations for their services is extremely noble. Defending student data, very important. Then there's also, again, the culture aspect of where we work. I have worked in other industries previously. The job I had, well, not directly before this, but the one before that was the worst job I've ever had in my life. I literally would drive to work every day hoping someone would crash into my car so I didn't have to go to work.
This is
same
how,
industry that Joe works
yeah,
for.
so this is how I know that our company is doing something right. We may not do everything right from a employee perspective, but we're getting something right because nobody freaking leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Just like 94% retention rate year
Right.
over year
Yeah,
for customers and
don't
employees.
get me wrong. We've had separations, but that's been instigated by us, right?
Right.
And primarily the separations have been because the give a shit has gone out of the analyst.
And even then, like the people that we've had some of those, but the people that did leave legitimately, they were going to pursue jobs that were extremely, Like
I mean,
a professor at a college. We had somebody to go work for IBM. Like
and we were happy that they took
well,
those
and
opportunities.
it was one of those things. Is like I hate to go. I'm like, man, you're a fool not to.
Right.
Right. I mean, any person that's not trying to better themselves is a fool, by and large. And we will write the best recommendation and reference letter anybody's ever seen on that. But by and large, I mean, it's been years since somebody said, "Hey, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
You guys suck," or whatever.
My 2 cents on that are we'll open an old scar, which was I think your opening prompt, but I think education has a huge stake in that. And I will tell you from my personal experience going to my local college here, the presentation that they gave for the spectrum of classes and degrees that they had, number 1 on that list was pen tester.
Yeah.
And they threw a very pretty $150,000.
Oh yeah. In the salary expectation?
Yeah, in the salary expectation. So how does, in little old town, right, small town here, where the average salary is between $55,000 a year.
Right.
If they're flashing this number at me, you're making triple what the average Joe here is making.
Right.
Not you, Joe.
He is average though. Oh, he's above average.
Thank you. I strive to be above average.
I mean, he's finished 3 beers in this podcast and he's still coherent.
Yeah.
I'm doing good.
But I do think education has a huge stake in that because I know a lot of people who personally overvalue themselves. And that in itself, right, is a little complex. But
we have weeded those guys out that come through here as well, who thought they were worth more. Then it was like, hey, if you think you're worth more, go get it.
And I do think there is merit. I do think there's merit. You should always have 2 things in mind. Granted that you already have some sort of humility aspect in you, right? But the first thing should be what you are worth.
Yeah.
What you're worth and what's available to you. That's always going to be something extremely important. And my second huge thing is understanding your path.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people do that. I see a lot of people say, even when I was going through the courses through college, a lot of people didn't want to work help desk.
Yeah.
But they knew a year or 2 under, help desk, that's experience.
Absolutely.
That removes the first barrier. And you're
Yeah.
right, it does take a year or 2 off their life.
Yeah.
But that was a part of their plan.
And that is probably the only certificate that I actually have, like, not respect for, because I respect many of the others, but that I think really buys into that idea of the certificate or the education alone is not going to be enough, and that's like the CISSP. Whenever you look at that and the fact that you have to have at least 4 years of experience, even with like one of the exemptions, if not 5 years of experience, they're saying that, hey, it doesn't matter whether you pass this test. If you don't have those 5 years of experience in the field, you're not going to have the commensurate knowledge that's necessary for this particular qualification.
I actually thought, and I wanted to talk a little bit on that, I can't remember what it was, but I think there's like an OSENT certification where one of the things they do is they actually, and this is very high level certification, but what they do is they literally give you a case, like a real life case that you have to go research and
Yeah,
figure
that's like
out.
the OSCP
And
or OSSP.
when you
OCSP.
turn in your results, you have to give a dissertation on your results. Like they will attack your findings and you have to defend
it.
them.
Yeah.
And I think
I like that.
that's and to get it, like you have to satisfy their requirements.
You know,
and that's an extremely
Jason, our pen tester friend, the first intern that Sinary ever had, has gone through that twice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's employed as a pen tester making $150,000 a year, and he still had passed that.
I mean that's
Right.
a hurdle, man. Like if you're
Yeah.
gonna go do that, that's crazy.
Yeah. But I will say this, I do hold the CISSP, but I got it like 15 years ago. There's no way I could take that exam now and pass it. There's absolutely no way. Absolutely no way. Things have changed too much. So, good show. Any closing thoughts?
I mean, I feel like we could have a whole nother episode on like education. And
Well, we've
how-
got more beer, but
Look.
if we do that, we'll be here till midnight.
Here's my closing thought. Education's still important.
Yes.
You should still strive for it.
Yes.
It's not the end all be all.
Right.
Make sure you're doing stuff on your own.
Yes.
Certificates are great for vendor specific things.
Right.
But don't let them be the end all be all either.
Correct.
And no matter what, be good in your interview. Look at interview processes and soft skills, because they're going to go much further than just the interview.
Or
They're gonna be
if
how
you
conduct
suck in your
yourself.
initial interview, ask for a second interview.
Yes.
I was having
Persistence is key.
I was having a bad day.
Persistence is key.
Mario, any closing thoughts?
I think my closing thought is maybe not as grandiose, but figure out what you love and don't give up.
And do it. And do it.
Because the thing about making a lifelong career is if you work in something you hate, you'll never enjoy it.
Yep. Agreed.
So find something that, truly, at the very least, it doesn't, something you won't hate. Work in something that you like. Work in something that you love, and don't give up. Just
Yeah.
because the first plan didn't pan out doesn't mean there isn't something else out there.
Exactly. Brazos?
I would say figure out like kind of what Joe took one of mine, but figuring out like what your path is. If you wanna pursue something, try to target that. And then the last thing, which is kind of funny, we didn't target or touch on this too much. If your college is pushing a certificate for cybersecurity and it is the college certificate, don't do it. Go and do an actual.
It's not recognized.
Yeah, it's not recognized. Just go and do the actual program.
My closing thought through this entire episode is this, and it echoes a lot of what you gentlemen have said, and a lot of what all of our colleagues have said, is never stop asking questions. Be curious about whatever it is you do. Love what you do. If you love it, chase it. Life's too short. If you hate it, get out of it. Life is too short. There will always, if you're trying and you care, you will always have a position somewhere. And with that, that's it for me.
All right. And that's, I'm guessing, the end of our podcast.
We're out of beer, yeah.
Yeah, three beers in, I'm stumbling a little bit, and I'm not going to lie, I got to go to the restroom. All right. Good night.